Shut down all the milk! Konnichiwa! Hello everybody, thank you again for joining here for the today's 10th anniversary from Fukushima disaster. It's been 10 years. This by Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. So many people died. 16,000 people died, and then still 2,500 people are missing. Quake triggered the cooling system and made a triple meltdown. And the Fukushima people, 164,000 people became evacuees. And then 36,000 people are still in or out of Fukushima, evacuee. They cannot go back to their home yet. For those people who lost their family members and people lost their house and land and taken their lives, lifelines. For those people, I think March 11th, 2011 is just like yesterday. And actually, it's been 10 years, but then because 10 years, I think more hidden fact appeared because so many people are fighting against government and TEPCO by lawsuits and then demonstration and petitions, so many things. So many facts came. For sometimes we have hope because for the lawsuit judgment came sometimes positive to us. But anyway, for 10 years, I always said it's a mountain of problems are piling up. And the one of these are the commission of the melted reactors. The 2011, Japan and TEPCO said it takes 30 years to decommission for these reactors, but after 10 years, they even didn't retrieve the melted fuels yet. Even the plan was started this year, they already postponed it, and many experts said cannot done by 30 years. And some said it takes maybe 50 years, some said maybe more than 100 years. And some people said it's impossible to retrieve the melted core because they are so highly radioactive and conditions and locations, it's still unknown. So it's like a Chernobyl, they put in a concrete coffin on top of it. So many experts suggested that way, but government insists to retrieve, even they don't know how to do. So the commission is still in trouble. And the contamination of the area, these are actually Greenpeace for 10 years survey. They concluded that these are like a fake decontamination. It's not really clearly safe. So Greenpeace really concluded that government of Japan has attempted to deceive the Japanese people by misrepresenting the effectiveness of the decontamination program, as well as the overall radiological risks. And they say the contamination remains and is widespread and is still very real threat to long-term human health and environment. That's their more than like a 40 years survey for 10 years. They concluded. And it's very funny that just a couple of days ago, UN, they announced that there are no relationship of the Fukushima meltdown and then children's thyroid cancer. I don't know how they could conclude like that, because still as how many, like 1 million, the rate is 1 million kids and only one person the thyroid cancer is a rate, 1 versus 1 million. But in Fukushima is what, against 380,000 kids and then 252 kids. Well, UN said because too vigorous test and the advantage of the technology for the finding the cancer dose. But actually is more than 200 kids already had a surgery. So I really don't know what is this UN report is saying. We do have another problem, so many problems, but dumping water is another thing. It's so many tanks, no place, so that the TEPCO and Japan want to release those contaminated water to the Pacific Ocean. And TEPCO many years saying that water is very safe because they cleaned and they has only tritium is left over. But finally 2018 they have to admit that well, because the some processes failure, they couldn't remove entirely dangerous radioactive material. So actually it has their strontium too. So they admit that 70% of water still need clean up, so that they want to clean up and then release. If we didn't find this, they just maybe released as is. But fishermen, of course, and then the Federation of the Fishermen's Group against those, because finally fishery is recovered. Now they starting selling fish. If they release the water again, their lifeline is damaged, and those let's see. Those group against the releasing group has two suggestions. One is make the, instead of release to the water, they want to keep in the land. They should make bigger tank. Just need maybe 10 more tank, bigger one. They can contain. There are some kind of example somewhere in the world. And another thing is those contaminated water mixed with mortar and then made hard and buried in the soil. But even the TEPCO government even didn't want to hear those any options, alternative. They easy way, lazy way, economical way, right? Just release to the water ocean. So we have to really keep an eye on it, because we don't want our ocean get contaminated anymore. And then more problem is workers, decontamination, and for decontamination, and then the decontamination, and then decommission. Those workers is so dangerous being there with placed in a higher level of the radiation to retrieve the melted core is totally dangerous, because it's tremendously high level of the radiation. Also, Greenpeace is saying that they found out that the neglect of the human right. These are human right violation. let's see. They are saying too, and we have been keep on saying that because this atomic emergency declaration is atomic emergency condition. They put the maximum dosage of safety level from 1 millisievert per year up to 20 times more, 20 millisievert per year, so that they could really abandon kids and then productive women in the higher level area. So that is totally a human rights violation, and I totally agree that Japan should really tell us when they put back, when is their plan to put back. But even the rumor is they want even lift it up to the 100 millisievert per year. We never allowed that. Yes, problem is mountain, but things are right. Lawsuit, only 7 lawsuits came as an injunction of operation. Only 7 said 差し止め injunction of the operation. For 10 years, only 7. But one of judge clearly said that I have no hesitation to give this judge injunction operation because clearly nuclear power plant is dangerous. He was a person really didn't know about nuclear, but when came to the old material, he looked at and he didn't get any pressure from the government, right? All court is still really has pressure from government because the nuclear power plant, those are Japanese government's policy. They started lots of government's help to the industry to start those nuclear power plant. So it's Japanese policy, and Japan doesn't want to admit their mistake. This foolish act because plant built in this earthquake-ridden island of Japan. This is a mistake, but they don't want to admit this mistake. But this is clearly mistake. And even Bill Gates said small nuclear power plant is safe, and we should go this way because CO2, climate, everything. But no, because the nuclear power plant is start from digging the uranium, it's already dangerous. Then the transportation and the operation, even no accident, they are emitting the radiation, and then workers are facing to the health risk. Then it's very terrible. Is we don't know what to do. The spent fuels, right? Then besides, if the accident happen, and it will happen because it's a human operation, and the machine, any machine make malfunction. So this is just accident is too much, too deep, too damaged. It's taking people's lifelines. So I really oppose. And then I'm so glad that yesterday was in Japan, March 11th. I saw many events, people doing, many activists, and then people are still opposing, and they are really working hard to have 0 nuclear power plants. I really, I felt appreciate, and then that gives me more energy. So we have been, because of the pandemic, we have been not here for 1 year. I feel like I have been hibernated for 1 year. Finally came, and it is March 11th, and the spring I feel. So from now on, I like to come here again with you every 11th of month, and then we really need to tell our voice to the Japanese government that we don't like your policy. We don't want nuclear power plant. That's I feel, and then this pandemic, and then this still mess, catastrophe of the Fukushima aftermath. Japan is pushing Olympic. Those I think maybe Steve will mention that, but anyway, I hope people don't change your mind. Some people, because the climate is a big deal, right? Climate change, and they believe that maybe nuclear power plant is a clean energy. No way, no way. This is a dangerous. Human cannot stand with it. Anyway, thank you for coming, and then end of my talk, I want to give a minute of the silence of people who lost their lives and then their families, and then evacuees people still struggling, still suffering, and still they're not establishing their new lives. I like to make just 1 minute, so let's silence.
Uh, 10 years ago, when the Fukushima catastrophe took place, that we would have to be here 10 years later. 10 years is a long time, not in history of humankind or history of the earth, but 10 years is a long time. And we were told when this earthquake took place by the government of the United States and the government of Japan that this wasn't really a serious problem, that this can be overcome. And as we know, when the meltdowns took place, the Japanese government refused to warn the people of Japan and the people of Fukushima of the dangers. As a result of that, families walked into plumes, where radioactive plumes were that came out of the reactors. So this denialism of the Japanese government has continued. The government has said that they can overcome radiation. Abe said that in fact, in order to get the Olympics, that they'd overcome the disaster. This is at the same time that over 1 million tons of radioactive waste has accumulated in tanks. Those tanks to go. The government wants to release that water, that radioactive water, into the ocean, the Pacific Ocean. The Fishermen's Association is against it. Why do they continue denialism of the disaster at Fukushima, the dangers of Fukushima? And the reason is because the government of Japan, like the government of the United States, is tied to nuclear weapons and the nuclear industry. That is the reason. They're profiteers. They make money. As a matter of fact, the Japanese government wanted to set up a company to sell their knowledge about how to clean up after nuclear disasters to other countries. Imagine that. They're going to make money by telling other countries how they can clean up after a disaster, yet have they cleaned up Japan? Have they cleaned up Fukushima? And as we know, the fact of the matter is that the contamination continues. And when you go to Fukushima Prefecture, there are thousands of bags of radioactive waste that are still around Fukushima. that haven't been cleaned up. Yet they want people to come back to live there. Who wants to live next to radioactive bags of contaminated waste? You've got to be insane. You have to really be insane. Yet this is an insane government. This is like the Trump government. You know, they're insane. They don't base themselves on science. They don't base themselves on the history of nuclear weapons and nuclear plants. They want to continue to subject the people of Japan and the people of the world onto this radioactive waste. And that is a crime. This is a crime really against humanity. It's not just a crime against the Japanese people, it's a crime against the people of the world and the people that want to have a safe life in this world. And on top of that, the Japanese government promised the Olympics, they lied, Abe lied, Prime Minister Abe lied, that they had no problems, that the problem of Fukushima was over, and therefore they should have the Olympics, continue to have the Olympics in Japan. Now, the fact that he lied to the Olympics Committee and the people of the world saying that they'd solve the problem of Fukushima straight out is a lie, and the government continues to say that lie. And in fact, on top of that, you have a pandemic, a disaster which has killed over 500,000 people in the United States. And again, you have denialism in the United States by people who say that there doesn't really, this is a hoax, that the virus, COVID-19 is a hoax, it's not real. Well, I think we've heard denialism before about nuclear dangers, that there's really not a problem with nuclear dangers. The same kind of denialism has taken place with the pandemic. And despite the fact that Japanese people are dying, that the hospitals are overloaded in Japan, the government is saying that they want to go ahead with the Olympics. The insanity of having the Olympics, which is supposed to be should be a celebration of humankind, of coming together in the celebration of the abilities, the athletic abilities, that they want to continue to have the Olympics in the midst of a pandemic and in the midst of the continuing dangers of Fukushima. It's criminal, and it also shows the insanity of the government of Japan, really, that they would do that. But let's be clear, there are several factors involved. The International Olympics Committee itself is a corrupt organization. In fact, what we've learned over the many years is that officials were bribed in other countries by the Japanese government to say that Japan should get the Olympics. So there was a corrupt process of determining the Olympics were going to be in Japan. And also, why are they having the Olympics when they've just announced yesterday that there will be no tourists from other countries? No people from other countries can come and see the Olympics. I mean, is this the Olympics you want? The majority of the Japanese people are against having the Olympics in Japan. What kind of situation is it that you would have an Olympics with no guests from other countries around the world, of people who want to see their athletes competing? The reason is, as is always, is that what the Olympics is about for the people who run the Olympics is profiteering, making money. And the TV networks, NBC, who have bought rights to the Olympics, make money off the Olympics. That's what this whole thing is about. That's why they're going to have the Olympics in Japan. They're going to have the Olympics so they can profit from selling television rights to other countries around the world. And this shows, again, the insanity of this system in this world, that the Olympics have been tarnished, the Olympics have been turned into a spectacle of greed, not for human beings, but for profiteering of the television companies. That's what the Olympics have become. And the G7, the United States, Biden administration, and the major capitalist countries have said, go ahead and hold the Olympics. We support Suga, the Prime Minister of Japan. Now, basically, the US government now is continuing the lies of the Japanese government by saying it's okay to have the Olympics in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of a continuing contamination at Fukushima. So there's a cabal of the companies of TEPCO who lied to people, of the Japanese government who lied to people, and now the US government who says it's okay to have the Olympics in the middle of a pandemic and in the middle of a continued crisis at Fukushima. There is no place for the water to go. And that's why the government has said they're going to release it in the Pacific Ocean. So we are here today in the midst of a pandemic in the United States, and I thank the brave people for coming out here to come to the 10th anniversary to say enough is enough. We have to say, stop nuclear power. Stop the nukes now. 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 Now, and we have to say that we, in our memories today, we remember the people of Fukushima. We remember the people who've died as a result of Fukushima, both the tsunami and the nuclear disaster catastrophe, because it was a catastrophe for the world that Fukushima took place. And yet, in the United States, they continue to defend nuclear power. In fact, the Biden administration says that they want to build more nuclear plants in the United States. It's inefficient. And as a matter of fact, it's deadly for the people of the United States and the world. So thank you for joining us. We're going to continue this struggle to educate. Our voices will not be silenced. And lastly, I would have to say that the Japanese government and the consulate today is having their own event. It just happened to be at 3 p.m. by accident. Why would the Japanese government have an event at 3 p.m. at the same time we're having this rally? I guess they want to compete with our rally. I mean, the Japanese government, which has $500 million to spend to oppose commemorations for the comfort women around the world, to say that that never took place, the prostitution of women, forced prostitution of women during the Second World War, the denialism. So the Japanese government today is having an event at the same time, 3 p.m., to counterpoint our action, our demonstration. That means they're frightened of us. That means they can't answer us. And you can be sure at their event today at 3 p.m., they will not be talking about the over a million gallons of water in Fukushima. They will not be talking about the pandemic in Japan, in which people are having trouble going to hospitals and people have died because of the problem of the healthcare system. They will not be talking about the serious issues that face Japan and the people of the world. They will be saying, everything is okay, be happy, and let's move forward. Well, we cannot move forward with nuclear power. We cannot move forward with the pandemic and take our masks off and pretend that there is not a pandemic. We have to stand up for people. We have to stand up for human rights. We have to stand up for truth about what has happened in Fukushima. Thank you, brothers and sisters.
Thank you, Steve. We have a couple of letters and statements from Japan. One is written by the activist in Fukushima, Chieko Shina, and the other one is Fukushima journalist Hiroko Aihara. So the first, Yoko Clark will read out that Chieko Shina's statement. Please.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? It's been a year or something like that since we got together. Hi. Okay. Yeah. Right, yeah. Okay, so this is a report that was written by Shina Chieko-san. Some of you may have met her. She's a great anti-nuclear power plant activist and an organizer. So she wrote this in English, and I'm going to read as she wrote.
No, she wrote in Japanese, and I translated.
Oh, you did? I'm sorry. Okay. So okay, fine. So what she said anyway through Chizu-san is this. 10 years from the Fukushima accident, the reality of radiation exposure is not changed. Is there any future when we can forget the March 11th? Under this slogan, we are going to have a March 11th anti-nuclear plant Fukushima action event today at Koriyama Outdoor Music Place. we, the victims, take the lessons from the 10-year anniversary of the Fukushima accident, namely to bequeath a world without nuclear plants and nuclear weapons to the next generation, and to mark this day as the beginning of the Keep on Fighting More movement. The government has exposed us to radiation when it lifted the radiation exposure safety limit from 1 millisievert a year to 20 millisievert per year. The Abe government wrote up a so-called, quote-unquote, the supplementary reader about radiation, filled with lies and fake information. This reader was unfortunately the only beginning of government's intentionally misleading, quote-unquote, safety education provided for school kids. After that, the government built a Center of Environmental Creation Communication Building, which is part of Japan Atomic Energy Agency. The purpose here is to teach elementary school kids veiled, sanitized version of nuclear power and how safe nuclear power is to humans and environment. Fukushima children have grown up being taught that natural radiation is all around us and there's no need to be afraid, despite that 250 children, by public record, were sickened by radiation exposure. The government cannot teach radiation safety Fukushima children. Last autumn, the Great East Japan Earthquake and Nuclear Disaster Memorial Museum was built in Futaba, which is sadly the difficult-to-return area. The director of the museum is Noboru Takamura of Nagasaki University, who has spoken about radiation safety with the infamous Shunichi Yamashita. At the museum, there are seminars for teachers and college students, and Takamura says, there's no causal relationship between child thyroid cancer and radiation exposure. After effects of radiation are widely known from the studies of Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and Chernobyl. From the standpoint of ensuring health for all the citizens, this type of wrong-headed radiation safety education cannot be allowed. When an officer from the Ministry of Environment comes to school and says that water that contains tritium is safe, I wonder if anybody can stop him talking. Day after day, children have been pushed to face the dangers and in the end denied a healthy life. And I want you to know that this is a reality in Fukushima. The recent February earthquake sent everyone back to that day 10 years ago. Everybody feels in crisis again, that nuclear power plants are dangerous. And we know that TEPCO and the government will never tell us the truth. And more aftershocks are coming. The nuclear plant accident is not over yet. However, we, the Fukushima victims, do not give up. We cannot allow them to damage our children this severely. The children who are our future. The power to turn around this despair is to get united with people, to organize, not despair, but hope. I'll be the successor of our struggle and will organize amongst us today. Thank you, Chizu, Steve, Kazumi, and many other people in California. We'll stand united. Chieko Shina, 311, Anti-Nuclear Power Plant Fukushima Action.
Statement from the Hiroko Aihara, the Kazumi Tori will read.
Okay, this is a message from Hiroko Aihara. On On March 11th, we meet for the 10th anniversary of Fukushima. What I would like to emphasize is that this nuclear catastrophe that occurred in Fukushima, Japan on March 11, 2011, will not end on this 10th anniversary. In the past decade, the government and the nuclear supporters had increasingly pressured us to forget the damage and the lives lost. They pushed to restart the nuclear power plant quickly, but we citizens and the victims have continued to fight against these policies. Some might say that the issues of nuclear damage and exposure end when the victim dies. However, as long as the nuclear power plants and the nuclear facilities exist, nuclear incidents will continue and lead to the end of mankind. However, I don't think the nuke supporters consider they will be the part of those who dies, and I don't want the children of Fukushima, commissioning workers, or even those pro-nuke people to die. All of us together, including the residents of Fukushima, must fight to shut all nuclear power and move forward to a new world. March 11th Fukushima was absolutely the starting point of a painful human history and the mission that took place to stop the nuclear power plant and its nuclear weapons. Let's fight and share the peace philosophy with people all over the world. Hiroko Aihara, journalist, Fukushima, Japan, March 11, 2021.
Thank you, Kazumi-san. Anybody want to speak out? You can do that up to 3 minutes or so. Yeah, please. Who wanted to speak? You, Dan? Okay, Dan first.
Hello, everybody. Well, here we are again. Which one is it? This is the one that's got the... Okay, yeah. So this is the one I speak into, right? This is a wireless? Oh, okay. All right, well, I'll try to speak into both of them. Hello, everybody. Here we are, another 10 years. Who would have thought it? And the thing that occurs to me most is that referring to it as 10 years makes it seem so long ago. And yet, in nuclear time, that's barely a drop in the bucket. We've got a long, long, long way to go. And yet, people, including people on our side, I think, when they refer to it as 10 years ago, make it seem like it's a long time ago, when really it's going on right now as we speak. I don't think any of the meltdown radioactive fuel rods have been extracted from any of the reactors, so millions of gallons of water are going to cool them and everything, and that could end up going back into the ocean. And then they're saying, well, they're cleaning, they've got filters, they're cleaning out the worst part. Well, that opens up a whole new subject of where is that waste going to go to? We've got nuclear power plant operators in California, in the United States, that have tried on numerous occasions to be able to put nuclear power, low-level, so-called low-level contamination, which they define as anything except spent fuel rods, into landfills. We fought years-long battles to stop that. And so we're in Japan, the people really do need to, assert themselves in that way. And I'm looking at, well, what ways can we help the people of Japan assert themselves? We're looking at the international accords that are being written up at the Paris Accords and and I'm not sure. I think that mostly they don't support nuclear power, although the United States would probably block any resolution of a no nuclear power thing in their energy production. But there needs to be a Green New Deal, international Green New Deal in Japan and elsewhere to take nuclear power off the table, to support the renewables the way they are, to see that wastes are dealt with effectively, and to prove that we don't need nuclear power in order to, support an economy. But along with that needs to come an effort to decentralize our economies. We can't have an economy where all our solar panels, or most of our solar panels, come from Japan. Solar panels should come from every country. Every country should have local production. We don't have that here. Everything's coming from Japan. So Japan needs this huge nuclear arsenal in order to fulfill their requirements for production. And, that shouldn't be the case. So there needs to be a downsizing, Of course, that's going to mean, a lot of socialistic things like not so much consumption, consumerism, not so much advertising, and all the rest of that. So anyway, there's a lot going on there. I don't know how much input we have into that process, international process, but it would be nice to call for some kind of an international Green New Deal to wean ourselves off nuclear power, to decentralize our economies away from the world markets thing that only huge investors can get in, and all the rest of it. Anyway.
I'm Dwight. I'm here to honor the people of Sendai. I lived in Sendai when I was a kid, before I came back to the United States. Here to honor the people of Sendai and Fukushima in Japan and elsewhere in the world affected by climate change, nuclear problems. One thing I read the other day, the Minister for Reconstruction, his name is Hirasawa. He's trying to say, or he says that they must communicate that their produce and their fish in that area are safe. So, but you look at that and then you see that China and South Korea and other countries in Asia, they're not buying the produce and fish from Japan because they're afraid. They don't believe the bullshit that the Japanese government's putting out there. And just like Steve was saying, the insanity of trying to have an Olympics at Fukushima, what are they going to do? Have glow-in-the-dark races or something? I don't know. It's ridiculous. So anyway, stop the nukes. Thank you.
I just have something to tell everybody for possibilities. In Berkeley, every Thursday at 12 o'clock, we have a gathering and banners, including the ones that are here. And we always need people to come. That's every week. It goes on and on and on. Then also on Sunday at 1:30 to 2:30. I'm sorry, 2:30 to 3:30. 2:30 to 3:30. That goes for another hour. And they're like, a small group of us, but we keep it going, and it's been there for many, many years. The really critical things that we're all talking about here is the university in Berkeley, where they're getting money from the government to make nuclear weapons. For a university should not be doing the students and the kids.